Hi, I'm Kristin, and this is the Simple Handmade Everyday Podcast, where I talk about living a creative, intentional life. I like to chat about quilting, sometimes knitting, what I'm reading and watching, and a little bit about keeping a cozy, organized home. I've got my cup of tea in hand, so grab yours and let's settle in for a chat. This is episode 76. Happy fall, everyone, or spring, I guess, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. But up here, we are diving into fall. I love fall, even though it's more in my mind than the reality of it, because here we are at the beginning of October in Southern California, and it is 90 degrees, and it's hot. It is not sweater weather at all. It's not soup weather yet, but we're getting there, and I'm enjoying making some plans for things like that. But there are leaves on the ground, and so there are signs that it's fall, and I am leaning into that. So, do you have something fun to drink? I've got this adorable mug that my daughter gave me for Christmas last year. It's kind of like a handmade pottery thing when it's a very light pink and white, and I love it. And I don't use it as often as I should because it's a little bit small. I really need to make tea in a pot and put it in there, because if I'm going to just use a tea bag or something, I want a big mug. But man, do I love this cup. And I'm just drinking some Trader Joe's Well Rested. I'm just trying to lay off the caffeine here a little bit, and I love it. It's a little bit like a sleepy time tea, which I don't mind having in the middle of the day. So I hope you have grabbed something fun to drink while we spend some time together. So, how is your fall going? I am still getting used to being an empty nester. So we dropped my son off a couple of weeks, the youngest child, off at school in San Diego. And then last weekend, I went to Catalina. My husband and I went to Catalina Island, the little town of Avalon, as our little sort of long weekend celebratory empty nester vacation. And it was lovely. I am a native Southern Californian and have never been to Catalina Island before, which is just a little bit crazy. So it was a perfect time to do something like that. I learned a lot. I didn't realize how small Catalina is, or not. The island is actually, it's not that small. It's just the Avalon, the one big population center of Catalina, is about 4,000 people is all, and it is just this tiny little, village nestled between these two big mountains in a valley. And one of the most fun things that I learned by going to Avalon is that there are almost no cars. Everyone just drives golf carts everywhere. As a matter of fact, we took a tour, and if you want a full-sized vehicle in Avalon, you have to go on a waiting list, and it's like 15 to 20 years before your name comes up. And they actually had just very recently opened a grocery store. I can imagine how hard it would be to do the whole food thing there before then. Our tour guide was like 3 generations native from Catalina, she grew up there, and so she was obviously very excited about having a grocery store. And it's a train called Vaughn's, but the parking lot of the grocery store had 10 spaces, and they were only for golf carts. So everyone gets around in golf carts. We rented a golf cart and just drove all over the island in an hour, and you've pretty much seen everything. So it was very fun. It was very fun. We stayed at the Atwater Hotel, which has been completely refurbished during COVID, and it was absolutely lovely. We would get our coffee and croissant and go sit on a bench by the beach for breakfast both mornings, and lunch at the beach, lunchtime margarita both days. I mean, life was feeling pretty good. And it was just really a nice time to, we actually ran out of things to do, so we were just forced to just sit there and read on the beach and, have some good conversations about the travel that we want to do and how things are going to be now. So anyway, so that was really fun. And then back to real life, and, I'm still adjusting to, the empty nester thing and just cooking for the two of us, which there are some good things and some bad things. The good thing is there's less cooking, there's less cleanup, everything stays cleaner now. I've fallen into my pattern right now is to just come up with 4 or 5 dinners for us per week. And I'm not even assigning them to days. I've started writing them on the whiteboard, and we'll just go, okay, which one do we want to cook and what kind of leftovers do we have? But I think basically we don't need 7 days worth of meals anymore. We can keep cooking similar amounts that I used to, and then we'll just spread out the leftovers. And that's been, kind of a fun idea. This week I'm trying a couple new recipes, and I did just have to pause and think, as I'm trying to, find the good parts about this. I'm like, this sweet potato, kale, goat cheese salad is not something that we'd be having for dinner if all the kids were home, just little things like that. So, just for the whole summer, I decided to take the pressure off myself for menu planning. I'm not going to try new recipes. I'm just going to do a fall meal queue, which is this thing I got from the Lazy Genius. I have a little notebook, and I just created categories of food. And so then I would try to plan out a couple of weeks of meals at a time, or even if it's just one, it's nice to choose from different categories that I know how to make, I know everybody likes, things like that. So that was a very easy summer meal queue. I need to do one for the fall, but I think, one night a week, I would like to get back to trying something new. I did that for years. I would always want to try one new recipe a week, and but it just, through COVID and stuff, I just got overwhelmed trying to get dinner on the table and kind of gave that up. Plus, just with 5 people with, different ideas about what they like, it was hard. So excited about trying some new recipes and figuring out a new cleaning routine. Thanks to everyone who responded to me from the last podcast, where I was really having this internal debate over whether I should hire a once a month house cleaner to do the deep cleaning that I don't really want to do. And so many people were just like, just do it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I got in touch with my former housekeeper, and she's not available anymore. So now it's a whole new project, and I'll probably just clean myself. So just lots of transitions, which is what fall is all about. So let's get into the quilting content. But before we do, I'd like to thank the Fat Quarter Shop for sponsoring the podcast. The Fat Quarter Shop is a one-stop show for quilting fabrics and supplies for quilters around the world. They stock quilt shop quality fabrics, pre-cuts, quilt kits, patterns, notions, and even cross-stitch supplies. All right, last call here to enjoy an eternal spring with Vanessa Gertzen of Lella Boutique and her latest book, The Rose in Bloom Block of the Month. With 10 enchanting quilt blocks arranged in a floral-inspired setting, this quilt is a veritable garden party of wonder. And that book is going to ship in October, so you want to get in on it now. You can still pre-order it, and I will put a link in the show notes. It's a fabulous book with fabulous quilts. Definitely, you're going to want to check that out. And I just received my order from the Fat Quarter Shop of my wide back blossom fabric from Riley Blake. And as always, the Fat Quarter Shop has just absolutely fabulous customer service, fabulous shipping, and it's always such a treat when I get that delivery on my doorstep. So let's talk about that a little bit. I finished the Cabin Valley quilt, which I've talked about the last couple podcasts, a modern log cabin. I'll continue to just keep that link in the show notes if you want to check it out, because it was just such a fun. If you are in any kind of a quilting funk, it is the quilt to get you out of that. And I did treat myself to the wide back. I didn't treat myself. It was actually cheaper than buying the same amount of fabric and sewing the seam. So I went with this light, it was called light denim, I believe, blossom fabric from Riley Blake as the backing, sent that off to the long armor, and I've got it back. It showed up yesterday, and I love it. I did end up going with the Baptist fan quilty motif, my long armor Deanna Senzano, and I corresponded for about 10 minutes as she was laying it out. It was so fun. She just was laying it out, it's a computerized program on the machine, and just sending me pictures of, what, because you can resize these things. So like the density of quilting on the size of my quilt, because I don't like super dense quilting. So I wanted it to be blown up, but not too big. And it was a great collaboration, and I'm super happy with how it went. So I've got it in my hands, need to trim it up. And last time I talked about doing a white binding, and I'm now thinking about doing facing. So I would use white. Would I use white? That's interesting. Yeah, because I probably don't have enough of the backing fabric. I might have enough left over of the backing fabric that I could do that. Oh, that's very interesting. So what I'm kind of wondering is, I know a lot of modern quilters do facing instead of binding, but what I'm wondering is that more for if you're just going to hang it on the wall? Is it a wall hanging? How does it stand up to actual being, a quilt that you're going to use? So I need to do a little research. This just occurred to me yesterday about maybe I shouldn't do binding even. Yeah, I don't know. So if you have thoughts about binding versus facing, go over to the Simple Handmade Everyday Facebook group and leave me a message there. I always post a link to the podcast in that group. So if you want to just, do a comment to that post or a new post, however you want to do it, email me. I'm available lots of ways. But so I've got some thoughts about that, but I'm thinking, I want to try some things that I haven't tried before, and facing is one of those. And it does give things a very clean look because there's like no binding. It's just the quilt it just stops, which is kind of how I want this one to be because it's just so clean looking, which is why I was thinking about doing it with white, but it would be, I think, even better if there was not the line there. So anyway, so that's what I'm thinking about. I'll keep you posted on that. And as I mentioned before, I think that my next quilt is going to be a scrap quilt from the class called Transform Your Scraps, the Treasure Box Block. It's a class on Creative Spark from C&T Publishing by Judy Gauthier. I've talked about it before, but I've now gone through the whole class, parts of it, even more than once. And I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. She uses a particular color wheel in this class, which is actually on sale at the C&T website for only like $7. And what's cool about it is that it's bigger than any color wheel I have, and it gives you more shades between, yellow and green, all the shades between, which is, she uses a lot to help you figure out how to sort your scraps by just holding up your fabric to the color wheel to figure out, okay, is this purple? Is it more on the red side? Is it more on the blue side? This yellow, does it have a lot of green in it? And it just kind of helps you to create good looking quilts because all your yellow scraps and your orange scraps, you've got it figured out, the ones that are more similar to each other, if that makes sense. So it was a great class. Let me just kind of walk you through what she covers in it. What constitutes a scrap is one of the first topics, which is not just like little crumbs. I mean, some people use those crumbs meaning a tiny little thing. She has some things that are quite large scraps because she actually, in her shop, she owns a quilt shop, and they make umbrellas, which is really interesting. So she cuts these big wedge shapes out and then I guess laminates them or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, so she's left with a lot of weird, like a lot of fabric, but weirdly shaped. It's not in any way rectangular. And same thing if you do curved piecing or if you garment sew it all, you're left with things that are scraps but are not necessarily small. So she talks about that. She talks about how she sorts them, which, spoiler, is by color. Now, I don't know. I mean, I've aspired to do more with scraps for a very long time, and I, for a while, would spend a little time each day on the Bonnie Hunter method of just going through them and then cutting them into her, she has certain pieces that she uses that works for her quilts. And I know that works for some people, so, whatever, you do you. But for me, I always felt like I'm cutting down this piece, and what if I wanted it for something else, and I would have liked having it larger, So I think that Judy's sort of the same way here, where she doesn't really worry about cutting the scraps until you're going to use them. But what she does is sort them by color. And again, I guess that's a difference. So many of Bonnie Hunter's scrap quilts, I mean, she does definitely have color palettes, but she has a lot of free patterns even for scrap quilts where it's just like, you just throw everything. And I've made one of those quilts, where it just did not even matter what the fabric was. And they all, because it's just like a general impression by the end there, I think they were only about an inch or an inch and a half finished, each little square. So it just creates an impression. So it doesn't matter if they go together. But I personally like scrap quilts that have a little bit more of a controlled color palette. That's just like my taste. So sorting things by color and then getting in there and figuring out what you're gonna do with them and cutting things to the right size seems to be a method that for me mentally works better. So I have picked a quilt from the book. There's a book that came with the course. You can also just get the book, and it is called Quilts for Scrap Lovers. 16 projects start with simple squares. And this book, there's a lot of quilts in here with using what she calls the treasure box block. That is so hard to say. And she has some templates that go with that. The quilt that I chose, actually, I mean, I think you can use her templates, but they're not as important for this particular one. The quilt I have picked is called Sunshine and Shadows, and it is the one that is on the cover of this book. And so it's a big block, and it's a lot of half square triangles. And so you make one block with a background, which I think I'm gonna finally try to get brave enough, although maybe it'll be too chaotic, I don't know. I would like to use low volume prints as a background, and I have not done that on any large scale before. I've played with it with small things, but I'd like to do that. And then each block is just like one color. So there's so it's a background and orange scraps, or a background and green scraps, red, like that. And I just love the way it looks. And so that's going to be my next project, and I'm really excited about starting that and using up my stash, which I've talked a lot about that I don't feel like I use enough of. So that is my next project. And as always, I will put a link in the show notes, and the way I do the links for the book, you can see the cover of the book there. So go take a look at that if you are curious. Now, the other book that I want to talk about is a book that C&T Publishing sent me, and it is called Quilt As You Go Made Clever by Jarrah Branvig. And this is the third book by Jarrah that I have. I have Quilt As You Go Made Modern, Quilt As You Go Made Vintage, and then this one is Quilt As You Go Made Clever. And I love Jarrah. She lives up in Seattle. And she's also a fabric designer, and I've worked with her fabric several times, and I love everything that she does. And this is a really fun little quilt book, and it has a lot of really small projects. So if you want to try some new techniques but don't want to try a big quilt, this is definitely a go-to resource. And she has a few. So the Quilt As You Go is that you are making basically one block at a time that has the top batting and the backing, and you quilt it as you go. You're sewing the fabric through the batting onto the backing right then and there. And then what you do is, and she gives you the techniques in the book, is then you take these blocks that are already quilted, and she has different ways of sewing them together. So, or you can just actually sometimes you can use the backing, but other ways you can do this is just the quilt top onto the batting, and then you sew it all onto the backing with different techniques. So a few different ways to go there. But she's got a bunch of really cute projects, and one that kind of spoke to me. Let me find it. It's called Port Townsend. Each of these projects in here are named after various places near Seattle. And I just thought this was very clever. She has a kind of a large hexy template in the back of the book, and you basically cut out a top and a bottom, and you sew that hexagon together, turn it right side out, okay? And poke out the corners kind of thing. So you've got all these hexagons that are finished in a way, right? And except for the little part where you had to, pull it through to get it right side out. And then she has you, I'm going to do a terrible job of explaining this, but I will put a picture in the show notes. So you've got these hexagons, and then for each of the little pointy corners, you fold that in a certain amount. And what happens when you fold those corners in, which you don't have to worry about because it's all finished on all the sides, and then she has you top stitch those down. And when you do that, what you are left with on the front side is a star, is the shape of a star, Like, what? So she has you take all these things and you fold them together and then you sew them together in rows so the whole thing looks like stars. So she has you in her situation. She uses the backside of all the hexagons are one fabric. In this case, she uses a gray. And so as you fold the little corners forward and you see the star shape, what you see between the stars is that gray, which forms this cool diamond shape thing. It's very clever. It's very clever. It reminds me, it's a little bit like if you've ever done a cathedral windows quilt where you fold over those edges to create the cathedral windows. So it's kind of a take on that, but with a hexagon. So it's very cool. But she has lots of table toppers, ways to incorporate lace into some very cool, just like string blocks, which are one of the easiest ways to do quilt as you go, where you just lay down a square of batting and then various strips of fabric. You can just sew them right on one after another. But she's kind of done her own thing with that by incorporating some lace on top of it, which is really cool, like a cotton lace. So lots of good small projects that you can, and not only, so a lot of small projects, but also ways to incorporate them into your home decor. So she is into antiques and stuff, and she's gone and found antique window panes or antique baskets, things like that, to use as a frame for a wall quilt. So super fun. So again, that's Quilt As You Go, made clever. As always, I will put a link in the show notes and you should definitely check that out. Knitting wise, I will just say that I am still knitting the elementary wrap from Purl Soho, still enjoying it. I'm getting some length on it, but it will in fact take me a long time. I'm going on a trip in a couple of weeks in mid-October to Massachusetts, where I'm going to work a trade show. And I'm looking forward to doing a lot of airplane knitting and hotel knitting and things like that. I think I'd mentioned before that there was a part of me that thought I would have this ready and done by this trip, and that is absolutely nowhere near the case. So enjoying that. Let's move on to books. So the last episode, I told you I was reading The Winter Garden by Kristin Hannah, and that I was about 85% done and that I was enjoying it. But I got to tell you, that last 15% was so good. Like, I think I finished it the next day and I was like, oh man, I should have waited to talk about it till I'd finished it. So in episode 75, I talk about that book, and it was so good. And the way it came together at the end, I was sitting outside in my swing chair reading, probably at lunch. So we often eat outside. My husband was sitting out there, and I'm crying. I've got tears running down my face as I'm reading this book. And he's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "No, it's a really good book." So I really enjoyed that one. And then I immediately went on to The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah. I think I'm going to give her a break for a little while after this. And this book, it's the it book right now. It's her newest book. And my friend Patty over at Elm Street Quilts told me to read it. She said it was really good. So I've been waiting forever. So I got it as the audiobook. And oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I had like a favorite audiobook narrator, but Julia Whalen is the best narrator. She does so many good accents. So she narrated The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and she did this one, and she's done another one I've listened to recently. She's so good. So it makes such a difference. So The Four Winds is, let me phrase it like an SAT question. As the Nightingale was to World War II Paris, The Four Winds is to the Dust Bowl in America. It's all about the Dust Bowl, which I realized I know very little about. I have never, in fact, even read or watched Grapes of Wrath, which apparently I really need to do. But it starts with a family. You know, this is like in the early 30s. We're in the Depression in Texas. And a young girl who came from a well-to-do family, but did not, for whatever reason, seem like she was very eligible marriage-wise. She was too tall, too skinny, whatever. She ends up on a farm in Texas, and it's a pretty good life. It's a pretty good life for her. Things are not ideal. But as times continue, we hit the Dust Bowl years with the droughts and, people really scrounging to eat. And the way that Kristin Hannah describes these dust storms, I knew about the Dust Bowl in general, but I didn't realize that these dust storms would come in, and it's like being snowed in. There would be, 18 inches of dirt up against the house so that you had to crawl out a window and sweep off the step to just get the doors open, that people had to store all their dishes upside down because just by the morning there would just be dirt in them. I didn't realize, that's why I like to get my history in historical fiction ways, because that's how it becomes so personal to me. So you can read about it, just objectively, and it doesn't touch my heart the way it does when it comes in the form of a story. So like a lot of people, then there's this trek to California, the land of plenty, where everything's green and everything, and it did not go the way they thought. Let's just say that. And it reminded me very much of the refugee crisis now, because the people in California didn't want all these people coming in and taking their jobs and living in basically migrant camps and things like that. And these are the same people who, this woman, she came from this wealthy family. But that is not how she is seen when she's in California. So I sent a few messages to Patty and said, this book is so depressing. And it's depressing. It's not a lightweight story, but I went back and I'm like, you know what? I didn't call The Nightingale depressing, which it was, but I learned a lot. It was a great story. Kristin Hannah is a great storyteller. So I very much enjoyed it, but it's heavy. It's a heavy book, if that makes sense. So in the middle of that, I took a little bit of a break because that was an audiobook. I usually have an audiobook going and an ebook going at the same time. And you know how I love a cozy mystery. And so the new Notorious Murder Mystery, and I think this is, I don't know, I want to say it's book 11 or 12 or something like that. It's up there, by Reagan Davis, came out. I just pre-ordered these at this point. It's $2.99. Take my money. Entertain me for a couple of days. I am guilty. So this one's called Bait and Stitch. They always have these kind of corny names. But it was super cute. It was just like, I read that when we were at Catalina, actually, which was fun. And it was just that sort of lightweight, easy reading. I'm outside drinking a margarita. I don't need anything harder to read than a little cozy knitting mystery. But this one was fun. If you've read any of them, they usually take place in this very idyllic town called Harmony Lake. It's in Canada. It's fictional, but in general, it's in Canada. And but this one is all the women go away for a spa weekend for Mother's Day. So it's a little bit different in that case. And we get to know a few characters which are like significant others of characters that we've only very much touched lightly on. So that was kind of fun. Like there's this character named Tamara, who's the partner of April, who is like the heroine's best friend. And I'm like, why do we never hear anything from Tamara? So now we finally get to know Tamara in this book. So it was just a fun, light little murder mystery. So I definitely get a kick out of those. So that's about it on the book. So let's talk about shows. I don't have a lot to talk about here, but we did get Paramount Plus. There was this deal with Amazon where we got it for 99 cents for a couple months. So I am getting caught up on Discovery, which is a Star Trek franchise. And man, do I love that show. I love that show. So I think it's season 4. I'm not sure if it's season 3 or 4, to be honest with you. But what I like about Discovery in general is that it's a little different from some of the other Star Trek shows in that there's a lot of women in, like commanding positions, a lot of minorities. And there's a gay couple, there's just a trans person now. So we've got all kinds of just diversity in the show. And I really appreciate that. I'm always a little confused when I come back to the next season of a show. I'm just like, what happened last season? And sometimes my husband and I will go back a couple episodes and get our head back in the story, but we didn't. I'm just like, you know what? I don't have to understand everything. I am along for the ride and I'll pick it up, which is true. And we have just the season finale left to watch. And it was, chucking along and, it's fine. I like the show and everything. But then the last few episodes, I think there's 13, so maybe 10, 11, 12, things kind of turn. You know how like in Harry Potter, book 4, things start to turn and really amp up. And that's how this one was. The storyline changed just a little bit and we were really into it. And so that's been really fun. And what's really fun in such the super geeky way is that for every episode there is a little thing afterwards. Well, you have to go kind of find it in the app, but it's a behind the scenes, and it's an interview that Will Wheaton does. And if you are a Star Trek geek, you will know that is Ensign Wesley from Wesley Crusher from Star Trek Next Generation. And so he gets to interview all these people and kind of dive into aspects of the show and the episodes. And that's some way that really elevates the whole experience to really dig in on that super geeky level. So we've really been enjoying that. So that's the show that my husband and I are knocking back. We've only got one episode left, and I think then we're going to move on to, things are stacking up for us. I've got a new season of Bosch on Amazon Prime and Goliath to watch. I think those are both Amazon Prime shows. So looking forward to those. And then for my own little knitting sewing time, it's usually when I indulge in my Acorn or PBS shows. My new Acorn show that I'm obsessed with is called Murdoch Mysteries. And it's just your typical murder mystery kind of thing. But what's kind of fun is it takes place in the 1800s in Canada. And that's what I love about Acorn is like I'm watching shows that take place in Australia and New Zealand and Canada. And that's so much more fun than everything being in the U.S. And it does not hurt that the Murdoch, in this case, is this super good looking guy. In his like 30s or something, but he's also super smart. Like, he should have really been a scientist. There's an episode where he's kind of going head to head with Nikola Tesla and teaching Tesla a few things. And so that's been really fun. Just the change in time period and the fact that it's in Canada has been like a kind of a refreshing thing. And lastly, what I've been enjoying watching is a YouTube channel called Dressed for My Day. And the woman's name is Kay Harms. And I am loving this YouTube channel. So in the last year or so, I've gotten a little bit more interested in my wardrobe and making it work. And mostly because every time I have to pack and go somewhere, I feel like I need to go buy new clothes. Like the stuff that I'm wearing at home is just like, this isn't right. And I feel like I am always wearing kind of the same thing, but I don't love any of it, so I'm just trying to kind of figure it out. And so I've talked several times about Fashion Fix on Instagram, and she is fabulous. She's like 40. She's actually pregnant right now, which is really fun. And she's got some small kids, but she's a stylist. She's worked for Nordstrom. She's worked for J. Crew. She was a Stitch Fix stylist. So she explains clothes in a way that I never understood. And she talks about body shape and the different details that different body shapes need to look for, and just what to look for in, mixing up texture and details in your clothes. And she has a wardrobe essentials checklist so that you can mix and match so that things will go together. So that's kind of coming together for me. But Kay Harms is in her 50s. I think she's in, at this point, kind of mid-50s. So that kind of resonates with me. Also, she doesn't look like me, but she's about my height. she's thinner than me. I would like to get down to where she is, but she's blonde gone gray. Like, so anything that looks good on her, I can go, okay, you know what? That's going to look good on me. But she does the same thing, but more on if you're over 50, but not in a frumpy way, like to not be frumpy. And also, she, like on Fashion Fix, she'll cater to anybody, but I feel like she's catering a little bit more to young moms. And so she's shopping at Target and, did normal things like J. Crew and Loft, but she does a lot of Goodwill things, so definitely keeping the cost down. Well, on Dress for My Day, she also tries to keep costs down, but she will talk about brands like you can get this at Talbot's or Nordstrom, or so she's a little bit more into buying quality pieces. But she's got these great videos. Here, I brought her YouTube channel up. So like the stuff that she's talking about, like 6 essential accessories for fall outfits. That was a great thing. And just how to make that change. She's in a warm climate too, so I believe. So she, how to make these changes even before it's really sweater weather, things like that. Let me find a few others. So she's got tips for transitioning your outfits for fall, 5 essential fall wardrobe things to help you layer on the style, 8 fall jeans outfits, things like that, how to determine your body proportions. So I've just learned a lot. She's always going to have way more clothes than I ever will, but she really shows how to put things together from a wardrobe basic standpoint. So I've really been enjoying that. And in addition to the YouTube channel, she's got a blog where she blogs like almost every day, I think. So I've actually just started getting those as an email, which is I do not do very often. I'm very protective of my inbox, but I think I'll do it for a while and just to see what all her new content is. So that is one of the more fun things that I've been watching lately. Okay, let's move on to the last segment, which is a little bit of a grab bag these days. I'm focusing a lot on productivity and figuring out what you want, things like that right now. So what I would like to pose to you right now is, what kind of a fall do you want to have? What kind of fall, and even into the winter? Oh my gosh, the Lazy Genius did a podcast recently where she said, and this was earlier this week, there's 95 days until the end of the year. So we're in it. We're in the fourth quarter here. So what do you want to do with this time? I know we set a lot of goals and things like that in the beginning of the year, and a lot of them fall by the wayside. But this is the time to start, making some changes and thinking about things like that. So I've been super reflective lately. Honestly, I sometimes feel like it seems like it's a little self-indulgent, but that's where I'm at right now. I'm at a transitional time in my life, transitional season. So I talked last time about the Silk & Sonder journals, and I just got my October one, and I'm super excited. One thing about these journals is, sometimes we buy journals and then we stop using them, and then there's so many empty pages, it's hard to jump back in. And getting a new one every month just allows you to go, okay, like I didn't do everything I was going to do in that one, so I'm going to set September aside. Like for me, I got it halfway through, and I used it really well for the half of the month, but there still was a lot of blank pages. So I'm happy to start in on October. And I attended what they call a Silk & Sonder social, which was like a Zoom meeting for monthly setup, for how to set it up for the month. And that was really fun because I'm new to this, and there's certain she would actually walk you through and give you time to fill out your September reflections and your October intentions and things like that. But also talk about some of these sections, like there's a lot of habit tracking and things like that in here. So there's a place, I'm flipping through as I'm talking madly. There's like a mood tracker and a sleep tracker. And a lot of people jumped in on the comments saying, okay, I'm never going to track my sleep. I'm never going to track my mood. So I use my mood tracker as a movement tracker. And so I have yoga and walking and strength training and stretching and things like that, little different colors. And I just fill it in when I do that type of movement. And I thought that was a great idea. Somebody tracked their anxiety levels because that's what they're dealing with. But so it was kind of interesting to see how people repurpose sections that don't necessarily speak to them, but it still makes the journal work for them. So, and there's a theme for each one. So for October, it's patience. And so anyway, so I'm going to be digging into that this afternoon. I'm really excited. So that is one way to be reflective about setting intentions for the month. And a lot of the intentions are, it's, I want to floss and drink more water and track my food and things like that, but also things about how you want to feel and taking time for self-care and stuff like that. So that's one way. Now, the other way that can help you kind of figure out what you want is this product that I love called Powersheets. And I will talk more about this on another episode because we are already 40 minutes into this one. But let me just give you the short version. And the only reason I'm doing this is because they actually go on sale next week in October. And I know a lot of times they sell out. So I wanted to just give you a little sneak peek. So this is the 2022 Powersheets Planner, and it's their 10-year anniversary. I bought Powersheets maybe 3 years ago was the first time I bought them. And then, to be honest with you, because they're a little pricey, about, I can't remember, $50 or $60, something like that. And it's not a planner. It's not a to-do list. It is a goal planner. And then what I did for a couple years after that is that I took the same prompts that were in my Powersheets and I just did them in a separate notebook. So, but because it's the 10-year anniversary, they've really updated it, and they have these awesome linen covers, and they had blue, my signature color blue. So I'm like, I'm going to get a new one. And they've really redone the inside quite a lot. So what's cool about this is there are, and I'm going to look at right now, there are 53 pages of prep work. Now, that's either sounds like ridiculously scary, or wow, you can really get to drill down to some stuff. And that's how I was. So I did this between Christmas and New Year's, the first year I got it. But it helps you figure out what your goals are and what you want out of life. And I'm going to read you some of the titles of what makes you come alive, what fires you up. One of my favorite things about it is what they call the Cultivated Life Evaluation. So they have 8 parts of your life: health and wellness, friends, focal relationship, family, finances, spiritual and personal growth, work and learning, recreation. And they ask you to rate where you are on those things, and then, make some plans. So like when you are creating things you want, goals for your life, they're not always, I want to lose 15 pounds, I want to floss, they can be more things about, I want to cultivate a cozier home. I want to dig into relationships more. Things like that. Things that you're going to think about when you get to the end of your life. As a matter of fact, one of the best journaling prompts here, I can't, from the first year I did this, was pretend you're 80 years old. What does your perfect day look like? What do you want your life to look like when you're 80? And so when I was doing this, I really was the beginning of a freelance career, and I was doing some quilting, industry stuff on the side. And I really thought that this is the year I'm going to really dig into my blog more. And by the time I got through my Powersheets, my whole perspective on my life changed a bit. It's like, you know what I really want to focus on, and especially then, is when I think I probably had one kid in college and one in high school and one in middle school, kind of a thing. And, definitely getting at the end of my child rearing years, I just realized, what I really want in my life is to just, dig into my home and family life, do my job so that we've got the money to do, fun things with the family and stuff, but realize that I thought I kind of wanted the hustle, but really when I look at what I wanted from my life in, 30 years, I'm like, yeah, that part's not as important to me. And so that was really interesting. It turned out to be not what I thought it was going to be. So they have you brainstorm all kinds of things that you want in each of those like 8 categories I just talked about, and then go through them, see if you find patterns. And that's what happened to me, is I found the pattern of a family and home more than hustle and business. and then, you find some themes, and from those themes, then you figure out what you want to do. So like I had basically I want, make your home a haven. That was like one of my themes. And so for that, it was that was there were some redecorating things in there, and renovation kind of things to do, and trying new recipes, and family game nights, or different things like that, which were not the kind of goals I thought I was going for. So it would be we should make sure that we have at least once a month we should have a family movie night, and we should have some sort of a family outing, and then they give you ways of very slowly, just working on one a month, and ways to track that. And so that's what was really kind of cool about it, is that it's not your generic, quit smoking or whatever kind of goal planner. It's really about as a matter of fact, what's the name of the company is Cultivate What Matters. And so that's what's cool about Powersheets, is it really gets down to crafting the intentional life that you want to live, from many perspectives, relationships, home, money, spirituality, things like that. So that's Powersheets. When we get a little bit closer to the end of the year and I start digging in, I'll do a little bit more of a deeper review, but I just wanted to get that on your radar. And we all know that often what gets in the way of us achieving our goals, and if I'm going to bring this back to quilting, finishing our projects and things like that, it's procrastination, right? Procrastination is an issue. And I have a little treat for you, if you're interested, to help break that procrastination cycle. So I have talked about Jarrah many times on the podcast. She is a life coach and a weight loss coach. She currently has a podcast called Weight Loss for Quilters. She is a quilter, a long arm teacher, author, and then she just kind of took this pivot towards life coaching and really focuses in on quilters. And we did a 5-day food challenge with her about a year and a half ago. I think it was in the summer of 2020. And she's the one, it was around the time she did that I was kind of discovering intermittent fasting and how that all works together. And she was kind of instrumental in that. And now she has, she's a full life coach, and she has several different classes. And she's going to do what we're going to call a pop-up Facebook group just for Simple Handmade Everyday listeners. And so the topic is Break the Procrastination Barriers, how to get more done and be happier. So she's going to be teaching for 4 days why procrastination has been plaguing you for so long. Go behind the scenes and learn about the science of procrastination, gain practical tools to equip you to start living a life where finishing projects and being happier becomes your new normal. Over 4 days, there'll be an in-depth look at proven techniques that take you away from self-sabotage and fear that are holding you back, and transform yourself into a project finishing machine. So I'm super excited about this. I will put a link in the show notes that will take you to a Facebook group where you can sign up. That's how you sign up. You join the Facebook group, and there will be a little video also in the show notes from Jarrah that kind of explains what it's all about. But I'm super excited about this, and I'm excited to be able to offer this to you guys, just because I think that, I feel like I'm a pretty productive person, but do I still struggle with procrastination? Obviously, yes, I do. And we all have unfinished projects, whether they are quilts or, projects in the yard, or I am really procrastinating about getting started on a bathroom remodel project because it seems too overwhelming to me right now. So I am kind of hoping to break through some of my own procrastination barriers with this class. So what will happen is that she will do a live teaching each day in the Facebook group at 10 a.m. Pacific time Don't worry if you can't make it during that time. They are all recorded, but there is definitely value in being there in person. She is always really good about taking, questions and interacting like that. And she's going to teach you all about the psychological side of this. And she did this with the weight loss too. And I believe it's probably going to be the same model, where she really just talks about it's cognitive behavioral therapy, that it's all in your mind, that getting control of your thoughts makes a difference in the results that you get. And I will, it's all proven scientifically. I will let her explain that all to you. But anyways, I'm super excited that she reached out and wanted to offer you guys a course like that. So definitely go over to the show notes and get into that Facebook group. Oh, I should tell you when it's going to be. And right now I'm going to bring up a calendar. It will be the week of October 11th through the 15th. So it's going to happen during that week. But the access to the recordings will not last forever, but if you can't get there during the day, they'll be there for a little while. So don't worry if you're at work or whatever, that's totally fine. Before we go, I did want to thank Paloma Quilts for leaving such a fun review on the podcast, on Apple Podcasts. I've gotten her hooked on the Inspector Gamache books, and welcome to the club for all of us. I keep re-listening to the latest one, The Madness of Crows. If I can't sleep, I turn that on, and it's such a comforting voice. So thank you for leaving a review. I appreciate anybody who leaves ratings or reviews on the podcast. Again, it really helps other people find the podcast. And as I've gotten more reviews, I definitely can see that does make a difference. So thank you so much for that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I'll be back in a few weeks. It might be 3 weeks because I'll be traveling, I think, on my normal podcast week next time, but we'll see how that works out. You can find me online at my blog, Simple Handmade Everyday, on Instagram as Kristin Esser. And please consider joining the Simple Handmade Everyday Facebook group so that we can keep the conversation going. Have a wonderful week.